no one wants to talk about, having suicidal thoughts or wanting to drink yourself into oblivion, or these things that we use or people use just to escape. And I think the darkness and the loneliness and the helplessness and the hopelessness, these are all things that come with it.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Madinat Mom Podcast. I'm Noor, your host, and today's guest, Dana, is a mom of 2 young boys and a passionate advocate for healing and self-discovery. With a background in psychology and a personal journey of recovery, Dana has become drawn to the world of therapeutic coaching, of mental health, of trauma healing, and she now helps others navigate their own paths with compassion and presence. Dana blends mindfulness, somatic practices, and nervous system regulation to support individuals and families, believing that true healing can only happen when we learn to reconnect within ourselves. Dana is here today to share her insights on motherhood, on healing, on the power of presence, and also talk a little bit more about cultivating a sense of grace and resilience and reconnection in our daily lives, which we all know as moms is something that we really need. So thank you for being here, Dana.
Thank you for having me.
So you have 2 boys.
I do.
And you were saying they are how old?
Amir is 12 and Nael is 14 next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through a little bit on your motherhood journey and postpartum? How was that for you?
Yeah. It was challenging. I'll say that. It wasn't, I like plans and nothing went to plan. I'll start with conception. I couldn't conceive. I had to get hormones and injections and, all those things. So it started off with a bit of a disappointment. And then I had planned a beautiful birth, ended up getting a C-section. I wanted to breastfeed. I couldn't breastfeed. And so it was just, it was difficult. And then I remember taking Nael to his first pediatrician appointment. I think it was 15 days after I'd had him. And I just stood at the elevators and I was in floods of tears. I didn't know what was happening. And later I realized, I understood that was postpartum depression. And it was very lonely. It was very lonely. And I was like, why doesn't anyone talk about this? That was my first thought.
I think it's also very difficult when things don't go according to plan.
Yeah.
Because you have an idea of how you want things to go. Do you think that also impacted your postpartum experience?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And so from where I stand today, I don't make any plans. I've learned a lot, and it's, we'll talk about that throughout the episode, I suppose.
That's a good shift. That's also a difficult shift from
is.
someone that used to plan everything to someone that doesn't make any plans. I think I'm someone that's also very organized and I love plans. But when I became a mom, I realized that there's only so much that you have in your control and you really can't plan as much. And how is it dealing with teenagers today?
It's a lot of fun. It's I love the season of parenting. I love the conversations that we have. My husband and I are very open with our children, and there's a book by Gabor Mate about how parents should matter more than peers. It's called Hold On to Your Kids. And so when they've gotten in trouble recently, they called me, which I feel is like such a win. I want them to come to me with their problems or whatever's going on with them instead of their peers, because, they don't have the greatest ideas when, you've got teenage brain. We laugh a lot. We spend a lot of time together. We pulled them out of traditional school last year, and so they do online learning, and they go into a learning hub 3 times a week. So there's a lot of time spent with me and the children and my husband, actually the 4 of us. And I think that has changed everything for us as a family.
And can I ask what drove your decision to pull them out of traditional school?
Amir is pursuing, he wants to be a footballer. And so Haytham, my husband, found the school during COVID. COVID, everything went online. And a lot of the schools didn't know what they were doing. We were all learning as we were going along. And he found an online school. So they had been doing it for many years, and it only made sense that we look into that. And I had a lot of reservations because I was a teacher, I taught at schools, at universities, and it's hard to change from what you know. Um, and Amir woke up one morning and he's like, I just want to play football. And so Haytham was like, okay, let's see if we can make this happen for you. So initially it was only for Amir, and then we decided to let Nael give it a go as well. So Amir trains in the mornings before he goes into the hub, so it's more flexible. He's been to football camps where we've taken time off school. We've taken trips to Lebanon when it's not during a school break and it's calmer. And yeah, so it's been working really well. And that was the decision that we took. We reassess every semester to see if they're still happy, if they still want this. And so far, this is working for us.
Mm-hmm. I think reassessing is part of motherhood in general, right? And it's so important to just pause and look at what, you've been doing as a mom and what's working, what's not working. But I love the fact that you've been so supportive of their dreams as well, because that's also something that in the region we don't see a lot, and non-traditional school teaching is something that parents don't usually put their kids in. So it is a big shift. Do you feel like they've taken it on with responsibility as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very smart platform. All the learning happens online, but they go into a hub where they have learning coaches. If they have questions, they get to socialize with the other students. And then they get to see their grades, in real time, and they have deadlines, and they are teenage boys, so they do need some nudging and helping out. But it's worked really well, and we went from an IB program to an American curriculum, which was really easy actually, and there's a lot of ownership and responsibility, when you see the zero and the term is ending and you need to raise your grade. They've just done it themselves. I, from the very beginning, said I will not be a learning coach. I'll assist in any way I can, but I will not sit next to you and help you do your homework. That was my ground rule. And yeah, that's the way it's been.
And how do they keep up with their social surroundings, their friends, their social life?
Yeah. So that was a big thing with both of our boys, and a concern, how other people have big opinions about what you're doing. We were faced with a lot of opinions and a lot of talk about what we're doing wrong with our children. And that's fear-based, I know that. They have a very active social life. And what I've learned is that your school friends are only limited to school. And my boys have grown up in Dubai. We've been here for 12 years. They've been to many different schools just because we've moved location. And I'm a very big advocate. You need to live close to the school. And football clubs, Amir has, and Nail's in a football club. And so they have a very busy social life from friends from different schools, from their clubs. And then the boys just gravitate towards each other. So, yeah.
And Dana, for anyone that is interested in also exploring whether online education is for them or for their kids, what's the name of the school? Where can they read about this further?
So the school is called Academy, and the Learning Hub, the actual location of the school is the Knowledge Park, and they have a building there. They can just go onto the website. It's, academy.com, I believe.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. We will include the link in the show notes below for anyone that is interested in exploring further. And you can always reach out with questions through that link as well. Okay, and going back to your postpartum, something you said really stood out to me, and that is because you have a background in psychology. And you said that 15 days after giving birth, you were standing in the elevator crying, and you didn't know at the time that this is actually postpartum depression. And with someone from your background, you can imagine that other moms that don't have a background in psychology also don't really know what is postpartum, what are the signs, what are the symptoms. And so if you were to talk a little bit about postpartum and how people can identify signs and symptoms to postpartum depression, what would those be?
I believe it's being overwhelmed. I think becoming a mother is overwhelming anyways. And if you've had a C-section, if your plan hasn't gone to plan, and birthing a child is difficult. So I think it's also taking time out. They tell you sleep when the child is sleeping. And I was like, what do you mean? I have so many other things that I need to be doing while the baby is sleeping. And so there were like just big feelings, lots of tears. My mind was really jumbled up and I felt like I couldn't speak to anyone. Yeah, those are the loneliness. There was a lot of loneliness, and not being able to keep up,
And how would you differentiate the difference between baby blues and postpartum depression? Are there any flags that moms should pay attention to know that this is actually turning into a depression?
Absolutely. I mean, no one wants to talk about, having suicidal thoughts or wanting to drink yourself into oblivion or taking pills to sleep or, these things that we use or people use just to escape, and sure, baby blues is, it's rough having a child and, your life gets disrupted and you have to learn a new way of being. But then a postpartum depression is so much more severe than that. And I think the darkness and the loneliness and the helplessness and the hopelessness, these are all things that come with it.
Yeah. And I think also the stigma around postpartum depression. And that's why a lot of women in the region struggle in silence. They don't seek support because there is a stigma around it. Have you seen that in your line of work? Have you seen that moms sort of hold back on expressing how they feel?
Yeah, because you just have to get it done, right? As a mom, you have a lot of things that you need to be doing. And I think you have to look a certain way. You have to have the job. You have to, pick the kids up on time. Dinner needs to be prepared. Lunchbox. It's like there's a lot that needs to, and then there are the expectations that we put on ourselves, and it becomes a lot. It becomes too much sometimes. And I think people can do it for a certain amount of time before the wheels come off, and then you have to address it.
Yeah, and you crash. And I think, you said it perfectly, but as a mom, you give birth and you just don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
You don't stop to process your emotions. You don't stop to understand your emotions. You don't stop to communicate them. Even expressing to your partner what is going on, what kind of support you need is very difficult because a lot of the times we don't even understand what's going on.
Yes.
If you were to give a few tips for dads, that are standing by the side of their wives and watching them go through something, not really understanding what it is. What tips would you give them when dealing with, or when helping their wives go through postpartum?
I believe it's just listening, and like holding the space. We talk about holding space a lot in therapeutic circles and not trying to fix it, not trying to offer a solution, just be there. My husband and I have such a great relationship where like the dishwasher needs emptying, and he'll just do it, or it needs loading. And these are things that go a really long way because at the end of the day, you're like so done and you've got one more task to do. And it's just be there, I think in our region, in the Arab world, the mom should be doing all of this. I think more and more men are stepping up to the plate, and that's what it is. It's parenting, it's co-parenting. It's not a single parent, it's not like the breadwinner and then the person that raises the boys or, the children. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important to just listen, hold that space for, your partner to cry, to process her emotions, to let everything out, because a lot of the times, like, there is nothing that you can say or do at that time that will help her feel better, right? But it's also the little things, doing without asking, just knowing the dishwasher needs emptying. Okay, well, I'm going to do it. Or knowing I need to grab some groceries, or knowing, it's the little things like that. For me, something that my husband did that really helped me through postpartum was a morning cup of coffee. Every morning, he just prepared before work. He prepared our cup of coffee and he would come up to the room and just give me my cup of coffee. We would sit outside, listen to the birds, talk, whether it was 5, 10 minutes, it made a very big difference, you know? And as you said, it's just listening to how are you feeling? Is there anything I can do for you today? What's your day like? And all of that. But have you also heard of any myths around postpartum depression that you would want to address and you would want people to know?
The misconceptions, the myths surrounding or around postpartum, I believe, are that you can snap out of it, that, it's just a phase. It's feelings that come with owning up to, like, am I a bad mom? No, I'm loving your child. Do I not love my child because I'm feeling this way? And it's a chemical imbalance at the end of the day. It's chemistry. And so it's not just being sad or down. Some things happened that has depleted whatever, these feel good, not even feel good things that you need to function as a human being. Yeah, I think those are the things.
Yeah. Am I correct to assume that if, someone doesn't seek support when dealing with postpartum depression, it will actually just bottle up and continue to weigh them down throughout? Or is it true that giving it time, giving it months, maybe even years, can help you overcome everything that you've been through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I believe it's a bit of both. It could be time, because you're developing a whole new relationship with this baby, you're with yourself as a mother, you've got a new role. As women, we wear so many different hats, and sometimes time, you say, give time, and things just work out. And sometimes you do need that higher level of care, which means going to see a therapist, maybe going to see a psychiatrist and getting medication. Medication, I think, is so charged, misunderstood. It's like a death sentence, or like you failed getting an antidepressant or any type of mental health medication. Yeah, I think there's that stigma of I failed or I'm not good enough. And then you have the root of like self-medicating. We drink a little too much because the feelings are too much. You just want it to quiet down a little bit. And I know that was my experience. I don't drink alcohol because I can't drink alcohol. I had to stop drinking it because my relationship with it was very unhealthy. I was using it to change the way I felt. And I hit a rock bottom and I had to stop. And it was very lonely that, I remember, talk about dangers of social media with the children. I remember getting FOMO. I used to hang out with these moms at the pool, and there was always champagne or white wine here, in the afternoon after school. And when I stopped drinking, I stopped getting invited to these parties. And then I saw posts on Instagram with these champagne flutes being clinked, and I just stood there and I cried. It was so painful because I was no longer part of that, but I was taking care of myself. The good news is I found my own recovery community, and I am surrounded by these incredible sober moms, and we get to learn how to do these things without the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, that's amazing. And congratulations. Can I ask, did you start drinking as a result of what you were going through postpartum, or was that something that you were doing from before?
No, I was drinking from before. I was, a party girl. At university, we used to go out and have drinks after classes, or then go to clubs. And then it became, there was a time where, it was no longer about partying, and it was just about making it stop, the feelings, and it was, a person that struggles with substances, it's never enough. It's one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, right? It's because you're filling a hole inside of you. And that hole is just, insatiable, actually. And so, no, it didn't start after I had the kids, but I think the relationship might have changed a little bit. I know moving to Dubai, was very, very difficult for me. I left a job that I loved in Beirut. I used to teach at university and I loved my job. I had a great circle of friends. And just because of the political situation and the instability that happens, my husband and I decided to move to Dubai. And that my children were 3 and a year and a half. And I was taken from, my whole world was ripped apart. And I came and I was all by myself. And I connected with moms who drank. And so that's when the shift happened.
And what was the turning point where you decided to stop?
I just couldn't. I couldn't. I used to wake up in the morning and I was like, I don't want to do this again, and it's, I knew about recovery and for my journey is a 12-step program and I just Googled. I knew there were meetings here in Dubai and I Googled it and I drove my car, dropped the kids off to school and I walked in and everything changed,
That's amazing, Dana. Thank you for sharing that. So for moms or for women or people in general that are listening to this episode and are wondering where they can turn to for support, I'm sure we can add the link to the show notes below and they can reach out if they have any additional questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Dana, you have a background in psychology, but at what point did you start specializing in therapeutic coaching and trauma healing?
It was after I myself came into recovery. I studied psychology at university and I got a master's and then I pursued yoga. And I did a few trainings in yoga. I ended up in India. And that was like looking back, these were all things that were preparing me for my own personal journey into healing. And I was sitting in a 12-step meeting and someone heard me share. She approached me and she's like, would you like to work for a company that does therapeutic coaching and companionship? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And she didn't know about my background in psychology. And I explored the work. I did training in recovery coaching and I haven't stopped learning. This was 5 years ago. And I've taken courses with some incredible people, like leaders of the field, the polyvagal theory, and sociometrics. Just they're all women as well,
Mm-hmm.
And I just explored this world, and I love it. I work for an American company called Silverbell Global, and the work that we do is just phenomenal. There's a lot of healing that happens, and there's also psychoeducation. So we hold lots of trainings and workshops and panels, just having discussions, very difficult discussions in public. We call it talking about the elephant in the room. And it's like destigmatizing these things. Mental health is such a loaded word. We use mental wealth. And so how do we invest in mental wealth? And so, the long and short of it, it was my personal recovery that brought me into what I do today.
And how has the work that you do today impacted your motherhood journey?
Oh my gosh, I cannot even begin. Like my heart is so full, like my children are everything to me. I used to find everything. I thought motherhood was so difficult. And I go back to the loneliness. I felt like everyone was doing it right and I just had no idea what I was doing. And then I step into these rooms and there are other women that are mothers and they're doing it and they've done it before me. We recover in community, we heal in community. And so there are the different modalities, the therapies, the somatic work, yoga, all of it, but it's the community that heals us. And so my motherhood, my parenting has grown and shifted and changed in ways that I can't even believe because of other women that I've spoken to and who've shared with me.
Mm-hmm. The concept of the community, it takes a village, right? It's so important, I think, in everything we do as moms. And I love that you mentioned that as well. And I think the loneliness is also associated with not vocalizing how you're feeling, because then you feel like you're the only one that's going through it. Research has shown that modern mothers are lonelier than they've ever been, and they do more and more alone, whether that's because we have become expat moms, whether that's because the village is diminishing for whatever reason, but modern motherhood has become lonelier. And, seeking that village, seeking that community is something that is very important. Do you feel like having a community around you has also impacted your mental well-being or your mental wealth, as you mentioned it?
Absolutely. I never have to do anything alone. I've spoken to women about things that are scary and shameful, things that I felt guilty about, just feelings sometimes. And they're like, yeah, so what? I felt the same. I've done the same. Let me hold your hand and walk you through this, and in return, I've done that for other women, and it's just, we get to do that for each other. Someone I really admire talks about penguins and how penguins, they nudge each other and they pick each other up with their shoulders. And it's so true. That's what we do for each other in community. Yeah, I've been in Dubai for 12 years and I have an empire of women, like women I can go to. And, when I arrived here, it was just me. It was me and my babies and just a whole lot of pain. And like, I cannot believe how far I've come and how much I've grown and how many women I've helped as well along the way.
Something that we're also trying to do with Madinat Mom is vocalizing and bringing to light topics that as moms we don't usually talk about. You mentioned in one of our discussions before that I think you called it recovering loudly or recovering vocally is very important. Would you say the same thing goes for postpartum and for motherhood? Just vocalizing your experiences, vocalizing what you're going through?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I recover loudly so other people don't have to suffer in silence. And it applies to literally everything, Like during COVID, I couldn't cope with the mommy WhatsApp groups at school and the chaos. And so I just left them and we played. We didn't do school because it was too overwhelming for me. I've learned from my work about nervous system regulation and co-regulation. And, that's what we do as mothers. We co-regulate with our babies and our children so that they learn how to regulate by themselves. A big thing with the company I work for is that people are paying for our nervous system, not what we know, but how we make them feel.
Can you share a little bit more about nervous system regulation and even somatic practices? Just explain what that is and how moms can incorporate that into their daily lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the day starts way before you open your eyes, right? It's just in your head. And mindfulness, I've trained in mindfulness and meditation, and it was a game changer for me, because I was either in the past, going over mistakes I've made or things that I should have done differently, being a perfectionist, of course, or future tripping about the things I had to do. I was never really in the present moment. And so one of the things is you wake up and like, where are my feet? I'm right here. I'm not in the past. I'm not in the present, not in the future. I'm right here in the present. I do a lot with breathing. So small exercises like the square breath, where you inhale for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and then there's no breath for a count of 4. And you're tracing the square with your breath and your mind, and it just brings you back into the body. There's a lot of grounding, walking barefoot outside on the earth and on the grass or just in the sand. It's just all bringing it back into the body. Because another thing I've learned is that trauma lives in my body, lives in everyone's body, and to release it, it's not about just talk therapy. There has to be these somatic practices, During our break, I was shaking, and that's one of the things I do to regulate my body, my nervous system. And they're just little tricks. They don't take very long. You just need to incorporate them into your daily routines and they make a big difference.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest as well misconceptions is that we have no time for this. And I will start by saying I'm one of the first people that will tell you, oh, I'm very busy. I can't, but you just like the little things you mentioned don't really take a lot of time. In the morning, instead of checking your phone, you can do that, check where your feet are, what you just mentioned. If you were to give some practical tips for moms who want to incorporate mindfulness in their very busy days, what would those tips be?
It would be, again, to be mindful how you start your day. You said it, don't check your phone. I know it's very difficult, I struggle with it myself. Sometimes, you're waiting for an email and you wake up at like 2 and 3 in the morning, just, these things that we do. So I think, the phone needs to stay out of the room. Invest in an alarm clock, possibly. Another thing that I used to do when they were younger, my boys, is body scans, and so it's yoga nidra, where you lie down and you trace the light through all your body, and it's a relaxation technique. And it's also instilling it into our children, because children don't do as we say, they do what we do. We know that, right? So if you're modeling these things, and like you said, Noor, it doesn't take very long, I love meditating, and then I love meditating for longer, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but 5 minutes is enough, it really is. And it's about doing it, being consistent. If you start your day, if you write one page, a journal entry, putting pen to paper, it just clears your head a little bit, and then you can breathe, a little breathing exercise, and then a 2 or 3 minute meditation that's taken 5 minutes. It doesn't take very long, and you've just set yourself up for success. You're not flying out of the bed. Oh my God, I've got to wake the kids up. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. It's like, okay, I can get them into my body first, and then we can go.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your sons are also doing this. Why do you think it's important to incorporate mindfulness, meditation, and all of that within our kids, especially in the world that we live in today? Because we live in a very fast-paced world.
Yeah. They're tools, right? So I've instilled it in them. They might not be using them now, but they're somewhere deep inside of them, and then they can come back to them. And our children use TikTok. They use Snapchat. They use things that were not there, And I think every generation has its challenges, like in the 60s and 70s, it was Elvis. He was rock and roll, that was going to be the end of civilization. Today, it's the phones and Snapchat and TikTok. And so every generation has faced something. And if you arm basically children with this arsenal, that they can use.
Dana, thank you so much for everything you've shared today. I think this was a great discussion. But really, to end, if you were to give moms out there a few words of encouragement, and we know that, moms are feeling overwhelmed and lost, and they feel like they've lost a sense of connection with themselves. What are some tips that you would give them? And if you want to give it to the main camera as well, you can.
Yeah. I think, first of all, is that you're not alone. This is something that many mothers experience, and that you need to speak up. There's a lot of shame that comes along with these feelings. The isolating is real. And so asking for help, I think, is the first step. And then finding that help. We, like I said earlier, we recover and we heal in community. So it's finding your tribe, and that could be going to a yoga class and connecting with the women there, maybe a cooking class, like doing something for yourself, and then finding the correct or the right help for you. In Dubai, we're so lucky. I mean, globally, we're so lucky. There are so many different therapeutic modalities available. People do it online. You can go into a clinic. You can see different types of practitioners. You have the traditional therapists, there are coaches, there are somatic practitioners. And, being a mom is an incredible experience, and it goes by so quickly. I cannot believe how fast these years have gone. And I still have mine at home. And I know that they're fleeting moments. But if we don't take care of ourselves first, none of it really, you're not going to be able to, you're going to miss most of the fun stuff. Because the last thing I'll say is it's a lot of fun. We should be having fun and laughing with our babies.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dana. I think that is the perfect ending to this episode. So to add to that, just a reminder on everything we talked about today, how important it is to take care of yourselves. First and foremost, find your community, vocalize how you're feeling, talk about it. There is no wrong in seeking support. There is no wrong in seeking help. Motherhood can be lonely, and finding that village around you is very important. Incorporating small changes into your day can really make a difference into how you're feeling, from waking up and having, incorporating some mindful practices to adding those mindful practices before bedtime, just really taking a minute to soak up, to process your emotions. All of that can really impact your emotions, and it can impact how you're feeling. And we will add all of the links to everything we discussed today in the show notes below. Remember to take care of yourselves as fiercely as you take care of your little ones, because your kids need you first and foremost. If you've enjoyed this episode today, please hit that subscribe button below. Hit that like button as well. Remember that you can always reach out to me on contact@madinatmom.com. You can find me on Madinat Mom's Instagram, and you can also reach out to us on www.madinatmom.com.